There was also a really interesting article that I saw on Idealista, and the headline was Discounted Properties for Sale in Portugal. And that's something I don't remember seeing for a long time. What does that mean? It means that you're now beginning to see homes that are being reduced in price by 30, 40%. And they're being published on the site showing people that there are still deals out there. But it's a dramatic reflection of the kind of price stress that the market is seeing right now. And there were articles last year that were noting that Portugal may be the first country in Europe in 2023 to really show stress from the housing bubble and to see a reduction in price because it's considered one of the biggest bubble markets in the European Union. Hi, this is Ted. Welcome to Valley of the Dolly. Today, I want to talk with you about a new report that just came out from the Portuguese Institute for Statistics, and it is the fourth quarter housing report. And there's some startling numbers inside of here. Stay tuned. A few days ago, the Institute for National Statistics in Portugal issued its fourth quarter housing report. And the headline reads, Prices in Portugal for housing have gone up 12.6% in 2022. And when I looked at that, I thought, wow, my gosh, property values are increasing so incredibly fast here. I think maybe I was wrong, values are just going to continue to rise here. But when you start to look at some of the other data that's included in this report, you begin to realize that's probably not the case. It said that there were almost 168,000 units sold in 2022, which is a 1% increase over 2021. So if you look at that, the prices have gone up by over 12.5%. We've had a 1.3% increase in the number of units that have sold. Overall, for the year, it looks like there's a dramatic increase both in the price and then also a very minimal increase in the number of units that were sold, all of which would imply a very solid housing market. But when you look at price is really a backwards indicator. So it's telling you what was paid last year. And it even can show you on the graph that the numbers continue to go up. But it can be deceptive because that's really a backwards looking indicator. Something that might be more forward looking would be the number of units that were sold. We see in those first 3 quarters of 2022, the numbers are really quite strong. But when you dig down into the report a number of pages down there, you have to look for the data and the information. But what you see is really startling. There is a 16% drop in the number of units that were sold in the fourth quarter of 2022 compared to a year earlier in that same quarter of 2021. And it's an 8% drop compared to the third quarter of 2022, which also saw a slight decline from the second quarter of 2022. What you're seeing here are really strong numbers for the count of units sold in the first, second, and somewhat in the third quarter of 2022, and then it kind of falls off a cliff. What does that mean? Well, if you're looking at the number of units that were sold, it will reflect the number of units left on the market. So we're seeing a 16% reduction in the number of units sold, which means there are a lot of units left on the market that didn't sell from that previous quarter. And when you look at pricing and it says that there's a 12.6% increase in price in 2022, you can look at an article that was published by the Global Property Guide. And in that, they published this in February, a month earlier, before these numbers had come out for the fourth quarter of 2022. And at that point, they noticed that there was a huge increase in the price of homes. But if you looked at it, that was a nominal value. But if you look at it after you remove inflation, the increase in property value as of November 2022 compared to a year ago was only 3.6%. So you may see a double-digit increase in the price, but once you remove inflation, it barely budged. And not only that, but if you're looking at this 3.64% and you're thinking, well, that's still a fairly good increase year over year, right? That is the smallest increase in home prices in the last 7 years, going all the way back to 2015, before you see price increases that were lower. Even in Lisbon, the price increases were less than 5% when you factor in year-over-year pricing. That's really deceptive, because if you included inflation, it would be over 15% year on year. You can see what the outlook was in February. Based on the numbers that had been reported for November of 2022, they were saying that there was really a truly robust demand for property in Portugal, and that it could be demonstrated because of the large numbers of units that were being sold. Now you go fast forward 30 days, and what do you see? You see the reports come in for the full year 2022, and the fourth quarter saw a dramatic reduction in the number of units sold. And a lot of the reason that we're seeing a reduction in the number of units sold is because we're seeing a dramatic increase in interest rates that started during the fourth quarter. Yes, there were a couple bumps in the interest rate prior to that, but it really took hold in the fourth quarter. So you had people going in to get a loan, finding out they couldn't qualify for the dollar value or for the euro value they were looking to borrow against. And those homes all of a sudden became out of reach. That's why you're seeing a 16% reduction in the number of units sold, because it's harder and harder for a buyer to qualify for a loan for the property they're looking to buy. And how is that reflected in the fourth quarter? Well, if you look at Lisbon, almost 14,000 units were sold in the fourth quarter of 2021. And when you get to 2022, 1 year later, it's less than 11,000 units that were sold. So a 25% reduction in the number of units that were sold year on year in the fourth quarter. And in the Algarve, it's even worse. The numbers were 4,313 units that were sold in the fourth quarter of 2021. Fast forward a year later, and there's barely over 3,000 units sold. So you had way over 4,000 sold in 2021 fourth quarter, and barely 3,000 sold in the fourth quarter of 2022. And as a reminder, that means that overall sales in the fourth quarter were the lowest in that quarter, in the fourth quarter, that we've seen since 2017. So what will the first quarter of 2023 show us? I'm betting it's going to show a continued drop in the number of units that were sold compared to the first quarter of 2022. And I think you're also going to begin to see a lot of price stress, because those units aren't selling and sellers are going to have to really reevaluate, have I asked for too much money? Not only that, you figure in softening demand, but now the Portuguese government has requested that people who have units that are unoccupied need to place those units on the market and have them rented. We're talking about a country with 10 million people, and we're talking, it's believed, over 700,000 units that are currently vacant and not being rented. I don't know the condition of all of those units, so it's something that will need to be, I think, really looked at further. But the reality is, if you're talking over 700,000 units that are available and unrented and possibly coming on the market for rent or for sale, you're talking about an additional glut of units that are coming on. Additionally, it appears that there are a lot of Airbnb units that are not being rented currently as well. And you can see that in this article that was published by Idealista, which was saying, I think it's about a third of the units are actively full on those, even though the majority of these rental units have appeared on the market for short-term rental in maybe the last 5 years. And that's almost 1 million short-term rentals in Portugal. So that's almost one short-term rental unit for every 10 people in Portugal, which is a lot. So if you see a dip in the number of Airbnb rentals and those units come on the market for long-term rentals, you'll see rental rates drop in Portugal. And if they go on the market, then you'll see a lot of downward pressure on pricing. So I'm really interested to hear what you think. Do you find the same to be true? Or do you find that there, in the area you're living in Portugal, that there actually are a lot of homes for sale that are moving really quickly and that prices continue to go up. So are you seeing prices increase? Are you seeing them stagnate? Or do you predict that they'll decrease? I don't have a magic ball and I can't tell you what's going to happen later in 2023. Again, it's something you have to do your own research on and make your own decision based on that. But when I look for myself, I predict that I'm not going to see prices increase in Portugal. I'm imagining that they're going to decrease to reflect that increase in interest rates and the limitations that's putting on the amount that people can borrow, and therefore a reduction either in what they're paying, which would mean lower prices, or a reduction in the number of people who are actually willing to pull the trigger and buy a house or a condo. This is Ted at Valley of the Dolly. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.